so let's get right into it. There's a really dangerous game of chicken happening just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. We're talking Russian warships, tankers going dark, and a whole country literally being plunged into darkness. And you have to understand, this is about so much more than just oil. This is a massive showdown that's starting to feel a lot like the Cold War.
You know, this quote really just cuts straight to the point. It's about a single ship, the Anatoly Kolodkin, that's right in the middle of this whole mess. And as you're about to see, what it's carrying is a lot heavier than just oil.
So, the big question is, how can one single tanker cause this much trouble, this big of an international incident? Well, to really get what's going on, who the players are, what they want, and where this is all headed, we've got to break it down.
All right, so let's start with the ship itself, because this is no ordinary delivery run. Nope, this is a very carefully planned journey with one goal in mind: to send a message.
So on the surface, the Anatoly Kolodkin is bringing a huge amount of oil, 730,000 barrels, to Cuba, which desperately needs it. But when you look closer, the story changes. I mean, it's being escorted by a Russian warship, and NATO forces are tracking its every move. This isn't a business deal. This is basically a military operation.
And that really gets to the heart of it. Analysts are all saying the same thing. This is Putin, plain and simple, testing the United States. He's poking the bear right in its own backyard, especially while Washington is looking the other way, distracted by everything else happening in the world. It is a really bold move.
But that brings up another huge question, right? Why is Cuba willing to be the pawn in this incredibly risky game? Well, the answer is pretty grim. It all comes down to a massive crisis that's absolutely devastating the country.
So let's shift gears from the big picture geopolitics for a moment and look at what's actually happening on the ground in Cuba. Because the desperation there it's palpable. And that desperation is exactly what opened the door for this whole power play to begin with.
I mean, just look at this. It's absolutely staggering. These are satellite images from NASA. On the left, that's Cuba at night just a year ago. And on the right, that's Cuba now. You can literally watch the country go dark. We're talking major cities, entire regions. The lights are just going out. And the human cost here is just enormous. This isn't just, a minor power outage. We're talking about over 10 million people affected. This hits everything from getting clean water to keeping food from spoiling to hospitals struggling to keep the lights on with generators. It's a total nationwide emergency. So, why is it so bad? Well, this chart explains everything. Cuba's power grid is almost completely dependent on oil. We're talking over 83%. And that oil is feeding these really old, inefficient power plants. So it's simple. When the oil stops coming, the country grinds to a halt. It's a massive vulnerability, a real Achilles heel.
Okay, so let's put the pieces together. You have a nation in a desperate crisis, and you have this very provocative oil delivery. Now we're going to see how that crisis is being twisted and used as a playing piece in a much, much bigger game.
So, what's Russia's official story on all this? Well, according to their energy minister, Sergei Tsivilev, this is all just humanitarian aid. He says, look, Cuba's hurting because of sanctions, and we're just helping them out. It sounds pretty straightforward, right? A simple act of kindness.
Yeah. Well, back in Washington, pretty much no one is buying that story. This quote from a White House observer kind of sums it up perfectly. The thinking is that this was never, ever about helping Cuba. It's all about poking the U.S. in the eye. A classic power move.
And believe it or not, it gets even more complicated. There isn't just one ship, there's a second one, the Seahorse, that's also headed for Cuba. And this one is using sneaky tactics, like AIS spoofing, which is basically when a ship turns off its locator beacon to go dark. It's a textbook move for avoiding sanctions, and it just adds this whole other layer of sneakiness to what's happening.
You see, this whole situation isn't just about oil and sanctions. It's also about spying. There are already surveillance bases on the island. You've got a Russian one, often called the Lourdes base, and there are China-linked facilities too. Their whole purpose is electronic eavesdropping, and their location is no accident. They are dangerously close to some major U.S. military hubs.
So when you put all these pieces on the table, the humanitarian disaster, the provocative tanker, the spying, what you get is a really tense standoff. All these threads are now tangled up into a direct confrontation between world powers.
And look how fast this all happened. Back in January, Cuba loses its main oil supply from Venezuela. Almost immediately, the U.S. cranks up the pressure with new sanctions. Then in March, what does Russia do? It sends in the tankers. And just a few days ago, the U.S. Treasury drops the hammer with a direct warning. It's just a classic step-by-step escalation. Action, reaction.
Action, reaction.
So the U.S. has made its position crystal clear. There's no room for interpretation here. They've explicitly said Cuba is not allowed to take this Russian oil. The warning shot has been fired. The red line is in the sand.
Okay, let's zoom out for a second. Because really, this is bigger than just a couple of tankers and one island nation. What we're seeing here is a sign of a much bigger change in how the world works, and it comes with some really heavy history.
And when you talk about history, there's one comparison that keeps coming up, and it's a chilling one. Experts are actually saying the words Cuban Missile Crisis. Once again, this small island has become the flashpoint for a huge confrontation between Russia and the U.S. It's stirring up fears of a past we really hoped we'd left behind.
So if you look at Russia's strategy here, it really seems to have four main parts. 1. Test America's resolve. See where the line is. 2. Take advantage of the fact that Washington's focus is split between Ukraine and Iran. 3. Back the U.S. into a corner. Force a tough choice. And 4. Show everyone they can still project power right in America's backyard.
Which brings us to the final, looming question that everything is building towards. That tanker is still sailing. The U.S. has drawn its line in the sand. So this ship, it's not just carrying oil anymore. It's carrying a direct challenge. And the whole world is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens if it dares to cross that line.
Thanks for watching.